Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we're going to take a look at Mars's entrance into the sign of Gemini. Mars is going to spend a good long time in the sign of Gemini, and as it does so, it's going to make a whole bunch of aspects. The other thing is that whenever a planet enters a sign other than its own sign, it is going to go as its host goes. And so we're also going to take a look at Mercury and how Mercury's changes in the upcoming weeks and months ahead are going to play into the way that we read Mars and Gemini. So that's our agenda for today. And I think this will be good because it's really giving you prep for what the Mars energy is like in the sky over the next, actually almost 2 months. So let me go ahead and show you on the real-time clock. Okay, so here is Mars in the sign of Gemini, coming in about 9:30 p.m. on March 3rd. That's Central Time here in Minneapolis. But you'll notice this really starting in tomorrow night into Thursday. Now, first of all, I just want to show you how long it lasts. So we're just going to take this forward by a month, and you'll notice that by April 3rd, we're only at about 18 degrees. So we have to take it forward all the way, oops, back up just a smidge here, to April 22nd. So you're coming close to about 2 full months that Mars is going to be in the sign of Gemini. So the reason that we're previewing this is because long, slow-moving transit from a planet is going to have a big impact. Now, the one thing that I would advise everybody to pay attention to is what whole sign house is Mars entering in your birth chart right now. You can take a look at my horoscopes for the month of March in order to get a little breakdown. But Mars's ingress into a new house means that a new set of topics are activated by means of that entrance. So it's worth it to say, okay, well, which house is being activated? It's a big deal if it's my 12th versus my 2nd or my 5th versus my 7th. So using whole sign houses, take a look at that. Take a look at the topics of that house. If you don't know what the topics of the houses are, if you shout out in the comments section, I am absolutely positive that some of the viewers of this channel would be able to even just give you a quick breakdown of what topics. But you can also look at if you don't know your whole sign birth chart, if you're looking for it, I like AstroSeek, Astro-Seek for it's a good resource for you if you're looking for a free way to cast your chart online. And then you can use whole sign houses as your chart method in order to follow along with the way that I practice on my channel. So, okay, so a couple of things. First of all, when Mars enters the sign of Gemini, one of the things that we want to pay attention to is what's happening with Mercury, right? Because Mars is essentially a house guest in the double-bodied masculine Aries sign of the twins. And that means that it is now in the home of its host Mercury, and it will go as Mercury goes. Whatever Mercury is doing, in a sense, relates back to what Mars is doing, because Mars is saying, hey, I want to be Mars-like. What does that mean? I want to be aggressive. I want to take action. I want to be brave. I want conflict. I might want to deal with hardships and overcome them. So Mars is a planet of strife, as well as overcoming strife through perseverance and stick-to-itiveness and almost like courage. So as a result of that, we say if Mars is a house guest in Mercury's sign, then whatever Mercury's doing is part of how Mars will end up having to express itself. Mars has to eat whatever Mercury serves. You could think about it like that. Okay, so what is Mercury serving? Mercury is serving a big dish of Mercury-Jupiter conjunction to get started with. And that looks pretty auspicious right away. Like that's a very auspicious ingress for Mars to be moving into Mercury's sign while Mercury is conjoining with the great benefic in a whole sign trine to Mars. So right away, what you're looking at is the ability to mobilize energy, especially mental energy and ideas, to communicate clearly and effectively, to receive good news, to make a purchase, to broker a deal, to negotiate well, to agree to things on terms that you like, as well as positive changes or initiatives around communication, media, technology. And also there's a lot of intelligence, and you could see this as like a lively conversation at a coffee shop that might be, it's one of those conversations where there's disagreement, but there's also joy and laughter. something like that. So I love this energy at the outset. It looks like a pretty positive combination overall. I don't know why. I just realized Neptune isn't showing. This is what you get when you watch my channel, because I'm always fiddling in and out with the outer planets, right? I've got them in sometimes and out sometimes, depending on what I'm doing. So anyway, sorry about that. Okay, so Mars is getting off to a great start when it enters because of its host conjunction with Jupiter. And we already went over that yesterday in yesterday's video. You could take a look at that and say the first 10 or 15 minutes of that video, I cover the basics of that transit. Now, so it starts off really good. The other thing that starts to happen right away is that Mars is going to, actually, you know what? Let me just do something. This is going to make it easier. I am going to just put Gemini on the ascendant and make it simple for now. Okay, so what happens in the days to come is that Mars is then going to get right into, well, first of all, there's a little bit of an explosive moment for Mars between, say, the 10th and the 12th. And the reason for that is that Mars is going to go through just a little contra antitia with Pluto. So contra antitia would mean that there's a little bit of a subtle form of opposition between Mars and Pluto. So that could be a little bit of an explosive moment between, say, the 10th and the 12th, or kind of scrambling. I sometimes see, Mars and Gemini with Pluto in these antitias, which I've seen now for a while since Pluto's been in Capricorn, that they almost always result in some kind of scramble to do something quickly because of a quickly arising situation. So I'd watch for that between like the 10th and the 12th. Now, as we take this further on, though, the energy that I really like starts around March 16th, and it lasts all the way, it starts to perfect a trine Mars does to Saturn on about March 21st, and then it separates all the way by about March 26th. So you think about the 16th through the 26th, with a target window between the 21st and 22nd of March. What's happening at that time is Mars is going through a trine with Saturn. Now, I'm going to say more about this. One of the positive pieces of this transit is that a Mars-Saturn trine, first of all, trines are of the nature of Jupiter, so they tend to confer like blessings and supportive energy. And you're having a trine between Mars and Saturn in air signs, which tends to be very good, again, when it comes to like implementing an idea or a strategy or effective or strategic communication or use of media. Of course, that's not always, people aren't always going to have good intentions behind, in utilizing this energy, but the Mars-Saturn dynamic is where a kind of disciplined, mature, serious quality is met with the hardworking and mentally dexterous energy of Mars and Gemini. So that's a pretty positive transit. I really like that one especially in terms of getting things done and utilizing a mental, that was almost like it's like busy bee energy, very productive worker bee type of energy around this transit. Now, I have to back up and qualify this a little bit, because the other thing that's going to happen early on in this transit of Mars and Gemini is you're going to see Mercury enter the sign of Pisces. Now, that's going to happen on March 15th. March 15th, the reason that this is a little problematic is because now you have the host of Mars, Mercury, in the sign of its detriment and fall, and it's moving into a square with Mars. So now you're going to have a debilitated host who's also in a conflicted relationship with Mars. This is going to be a little bit tense, which is why it's nice to have the Mars trine Saturn in the mix. Okay, so let's break down, first of all, a detriment and fall, a little bit about what they are, and then what Mercury has to face in this sign. So a detriment is just a way of talking about the inherent archetypal tension that exists when you take any planet and put it in the sign of its opposite, the opposite sign to its own, where it then has to contend with the polar opposite archetypal energy to its own nature. And that is challenging to the planet because it will be somewhat subordinate or dependent upon its host. So it would be like, if I'm country and you're reggae or something like that, and I have to go over to your house, and I might really like country music, but I'm really at the mercy of my host who really likes reggae. So I'm going to have to put up with reggae music, even though it might not be my favorite type of music. Actually, I'm not a country fan or a reggae fan, really. My wife loves reggae. But so the point is, the simple point is that when the planet is in the sign opposite to its own, it has to compromise and find a way of acting in accord to an archetype that's just contrary to its own nature. And of course, many good things can come out of that tension, many inventive things. And there's, of course, always opportunities to grow and learn from such placements. Ancient astrologers did not look at them, any of these, as inherently negative or positive. It's our tendency to think in extremes. It's our almost sort of almost like a good versus evil tendency that we in the modern world have inherited and also react to very strongly, that we're projecting backward onto this language. That's not how they were thinking about it. So when you think of Mercury in Pisces, you're in its detriment or in its exile. What you're just saying is that it has to struggle with not being in a place that's conducive to its own nature. It has to do Jupiter things, and it's not Jupiter, it's Mercury. So that becomes this tension that it has to deal with. There's, of course, again, there's lots of positives that come out of this. Now, it's also in its fall because in Virgo, Mercury is also exalted. That's a place where mercurial things become incredibly strong. And there's a very deep and esoteric explanation given to why Mercury is exalted in Virgo and why it's in its fall in the opposite sign and so forth. But for Mercury, what it boils down to, you could think about it like this. One of the explanations that's given by Rhetorius is that you have essentially the sign of Venus's exaltation in Pisces. And that's the rise or return of light, cohesion, unity, and sensuality at the beginning of zodiacal spring. Mercury takes its home in signs where the light is dying and where things are falling apart. Mercury is the god that is always on the move and always changing, and tends to represent the descent into the underworld. Mercury is always diving back into the underworld. And so Mercury's natural archetypal meaning has to do with reason and with the mental or rational faculties of intelligence, and with debate and discourse, with breaking things down and taking things apart, skepticism. And those are all virtues and gifts that are divine, right? And then but then you're putting it into Jupiter's sign in Venus's exaltation, which tends to represent sensuality. And for ancient astrologers, sensuality and mental energy are often at odds with one another. For example, if you ever try to sit down and have a nice romantic meal, and then someone wants to talk about something that's really contentious and take things apart and break things apart, it can be a buzzkill. You've heard people be like, oh, come on, don't get too in your head, it'll be a buzzkill. That's essentially what ancient astrologers were saying about one of the archetypal tensions that exists when Mercury is in Venus's exaltation, as well as Jupiter's domicile, where Jupiter is also about cohesion, unity, faith, trust, order. Mercury's not about those things. That's fine. They have different domains of divine reality that they point to. So when Mercury is in Jupiter's sign and Venus's exaltation, it's simply dealing with those tensions. The language that we use, depression or exile, those were artistic or poetic words to talk about Mercury having to compromise with its own nature. And so, of course, many positive things can come out of this. Lyricism, a stream of consciousness writing, a poetic mindedness, a more intuitive mental quality, emotional intelligence. There's tons of things that could be virtues that come out of Mercury in the sign, but there's also some real challenges. One of those challenges is that decidedly not an air sign, right? Water is not air. And this is a feminine sign, not a masculine sign. So it has a receptivity and a fluidity and an emotional quality. And when the mental quality of Mercury is in that sign, it's more romantic, it's moodier. It could be prone to being a little bit more irrational, or it could be prone to unclear or fuzzy thinking, incoherency of thought or mind. And so, again, that's on the other side of the coin, you could have things that are very intuitive and fluid and sort of beautiful. It's or even almost like a non-ordinary mystical state of understanding or realization, esoteric truths that are non-linear. Okay, but when Mercury is not only in Pisces, but then squaring Mars in Gemini, squares are of the nature of Mars. What this means is that when you're looking at this dynamic that's going to start happening around March 15th, you're talking about the potential for Mars in Gemini to be, who is going to be much more mental and rational and airy, and it's going to have much more of a masculine, rational quality to it. It is then contending with a much more emotional and feminine Mercury. And that is going to be tense for both of them. Mercury is going to want to do things that are a bit more, let's say, romantic and mystical or imaginative, and might not think clearly. But on the other hand, Mars in Gemini could be therefore trying to execute things that aren't well thought out. On the other hand, Mars in Gemini might need to be somewhat frustrated or confounded by a different kind of logic or a different kind of reasoning. So you have that tension between them mounting, and it starts on March 15th, and then it's going to perfect all the way through about March 24th, right? And that's happening as Mercury, you can March 23rd into the 24th, as Mercury then squares Mars exactly. So that's an interesting part of the month, where, okay, like here's a great example from my childhood. I remember one time, when I was a kid, I had a friend, and I don't know his astrology or anything like that, but I had a friend who said to me, we had an encounter with someone, another person, and I was walking away with like a really bad feeling about it. And it was a feeling. And he was like, but nothing that he said was da da da. And I was like, no, it was his tone of voice. It was his mood. It was like something subtle I was picking. It was instinctual, in other words. And I'll never forget that he was a more mental, rational buddy of mine. And he was like, no, I just think you're wrong. There's nothing, like you're reading into it too much, da da da. Well, I ended up being right about this other kid's intention, this other dude. So he was older than us. So this other guy turned out to be bad news, and I had picked up on it. And I remember it was one of my first memories of being like, you can't just operate at the level of the mental rational. There has to be this instinctual level at which you feel into things and feel someone's tone of voice and feel what's behind the words. And Mercury in Pisces can be very good at that. And Mars in Gemini may sometimes move forward a little bit without maybe taking account of that deeper level. On the other hand, sometimes people, we've all probably had the opposite experience, right? Where, let's say someone says, oh, I've just got a feeling that this is what we should do. I've just got a feeling. And you're like, doesn't sound like you're being reasonable, or it doesn't sound like you've thought this out well enough. And if I look at your track record, there's lots of things that you've had feelings about that have led you to always, needing me to like lend you money or crash on my couch or something, like you're in college or whatever. Everyone has had friends like that at one point or another, or maybe it's been you or me. And you're like, sometimes your intuition is good, but sometimes it's like, you've got to be more organized with your thoughts, or you need to be more clear and executive with your thinking. So that kind of debate might be really peaking between Mercury and Mars toward the end of this month. That's a big dance going on between them. And again, I'm not here today, don't misunderstand me when I talk about dignities. We're not trashing Mercury in Pisces. If you have that placement in your chart, it's not good or bad. It's just that there's this inherent archetypal tension, and the ancient astrologers had a language for it. And remember, they considered the planets divine, and they considered these placements to be reflective of all these different patternings and combinations of patterns in the mind of God. And it's our consciousness that is able to resolve those tensions meaningfully. And you don't have to eliminate those tensions to resolve them meaningfully either. So there is a tension that we've all experienced between the mental and the emotional, and those qualities can come together or they can be at odds. And when Mercury is in Pisces, there are going to be times where that tension is problematic. It is challenging. And that's why the ancient astrologers gave it that language. But it doesn't mean that they weren't well aware of the fact that there were very beautiful ways that tension could play out or express itself. So you just have to fully understand the language of ancient dignities, the whole system and philosophy behind it to appreciate it. It's also problematic, as I tell my students, you never want to use this language with clients who don't know the language. It's craft language meant for astrologers, not meant for, people. So of course, when people are considering their own birth chart, you're not like, oh, well, you have this detrimental planet, because people think that they are their planets, first of all, which is totally problematic. And then second of all, they're going to think, oh, well, that means I'm detrimental. That means I'm this or that. And then they think they have to spin it in a positive direction. This is all of it's mistaken. So at any rate, again, just a few simple teachings about dignities, because I think I mentioned, I forget which placement I mentioned yesterday. And then last week I mentioned one too. And I got a few emails from people being like, feeling like they had to defend a certain planetary placement. And, it's a common thing that people run into when they first start studying ancient astrology, because they don't fully understand the philosophy behind it. So at any rate, let's go back to the real-time clock now. And I want to point you to a few other dynamics. Now, things get considerably more interesting and mystical. And if you like woo and you feel like signing up for like a good, healthy dose of woo this month, check out March 29th, because look at this. Mercury is with Neptune, and Mercury is, in the conjunction with Neptune, while Mars is also starting to enter into the square with Neptune. So it's just really interesting the way that the mental and rational and the sort of non-linear and emotional are going to meet with one another this month, mid-month, but then you can see it peaks again toward the very end of the month as Mars's host Mercury gets together with Neptune. Okay, well, then if you go forward just a little bit more, so some of the qualities and tensions I just mentioned will also peak again at the end of the month. Then what you're going to see is around April 4th, there's two things that happen. One is that Mercury enters into Aries, which, I'll be honest, this is a better combination, much better combination for Mercury and Mars than the square is, right? So now you've got Mercury in Aries, which is Mars's sign, and Mars is in Gemini, which is Mercury's sign. That means they're in each other's signs, which is called mutual reception. So, and they're in a sextile with one another, which is of the nature of Venus. So they are really going to start to harmonize around April 4th. That harmony is going to mean, really mobile, flexible, intelligent, executive, initiating qualities of mind and Mercury energy. When I say executive, that's Mars. Initiating, that's Mars. Action, that's Mars. So the mobilization of mental energy becomes really strong and harmonious around April 4th. And that's great for things like launching a new product or, making announcements or cleaning up something and creating a new strategy, a better strategy, implementing a new organizational technique, a new use of media, inventive qualities, original thinking, quick problem solving. These are all great qualities that'll start emerging around April 4th. As that's happening, you're just getting this big hoorah from Mars, because it's also going to go into the square with Neptune. So now you're having this Mars Neptune energy. This is like a kind of like a Joan of Arc energy, where Mars is going to be, Mars is always a fighter, but when it hits Neptune, it's like I've received a holy vision. Something greater than myself, something transcendental or something subtle is moving within me, connecting me to a larger feeling of unity, imagination, vision, and mission. So Mars becomes, like that kind of Joan of Arc quality. I've received a vision. I'm going to go into a holy war of some kind. There's a larger cause. That's a really strong energy around April 8th in particular and into the 9th. Okay, and if that's not enough, Mars is picking up serious steam at this time, because then by the tail end of its transit, say April 15th into the 16th, look at what's happening. We're going to have Mars connect with Jupiter in a trine. And this is happening again while it still has great support from Mercury, and now also from an exalted sun in Aries. Mercury's combust by this point, so Mercury a little dinged up, but it's not a big deal, because Mars is going to have the sextile connection to the exalted sun, which is it has a reception with, because the sun is exalted and in Aries, which is Mars's sign. So this configuration that's happening around mid-April, I guarantee we'll be talking about it again, because it is so powerful. Here's Mars and Jupiter just amplifying the positivity and growth and gain and benefit around Mars. And then it's got this really powerful connection from an exalted sun. I look at this and I go, when people are trying to move forward, again, Mars, with ideas, with mental energy, with media, with technology, with negotiations, with business, all Mercury stuff, it is going to receive such a wave of generous support and incentive and motivation and strength. The downside is, overconfidence, hubris, maybe almost like too martial, too mental. But the thing that I like about this is that it's been checked all along the way, Mars has, by the more emotional feminine qualities of Pisces. So I'm looking at this Mars journey between now and late April and going like, wow, this is going to be quite an interesting time for Mars. So what are my main takeaways here? Like what advice would I give to people for this transit? Well, the main thing is figure out where Gemini is by whole sign house in your birth chart, because that's the area where all of the concentration is going to be. And then look at Pisces and Aries in particular, and how those areas will be interacting with Mars. So big stuff there. The other thing is, think about this word. Okay, these are just all kinds of things: words, language, media, communication, marketing, linguistics, business savvy. Mars in Gemini is dexterous, sometimes prone to mental agitation or turbulence. It's a very shifty planet. It can't always sit still well. It's a very good one to if you have Mars in Gemini. I have Mars in Gemini. It's good for meditation, any kind of, and moving meditation is really good for Mars and Gemini too. Like I circumambulate my altar with my beads. Good at many different things. Sometimes non-committal, changes a lot, needs stimulation, sometimes to its detriment. Changeable, possibly also deceptive, or, like when I was young, one of the things that I feel like you can see as a person matures and grows in spiritual life, oftentimes the way that they'll relate to the archetypes of a planet will change. When I was young, I often had issues with lying and exaggerating, and had a little streak where I was, what's the word, a klepto, something like that. It's like someone who steals. So I used to go like steal candy from the drugstore. That we're talking about like 15 cents back in the day. I guess it was like, what were they called? Laffy Taffies or something like that, I think they were called. So I used to do stuff like that. And I just had this like, and then that karma, working off some of that karma actually came for me during my time working with ayahuasca. It was like I'd really stopped doing that in my life, but there were a few ceremonies I had where it was like really getting deep into that pattern. And that's a thing for Mars and Gemini, is like the element of deceptiveness, or the changeability, need for stimulation, thrills. Mars and Mercury sign, for example, I had no intention, nor did I think I had any ability to start a business or to have any, like, I didn't go to business school. I was studying creative writing. So you have a lot of like I was good at writing, and I liked wordsmithing and stuff like that, very Mars Mercury. But I had no idea that until I actually started a business that I would be able to figure it out. That's something about Mercury Mars in Gemini, is that Mars and Gemini people, if I reflect on myself and the clients I've seen, are oftentimes able to just figure things out. Like there's a street smarts. So that's where you'll see ancient astrologers sometimes talking about problem solving ability or inventiveness with Mercury and Mars combinations. Mars Mercury was also associated with the sciences, because there's kind of this, like in math and science and chemistry, there's like this incisive Mars intellectual quality, Mercury. So incisive intellects, speech, rhetoric, debate. I was on the debate team in college, for example. So you have those kinds of things are skill sets. And if you think about what a marketplace was in the ancient world compared to today, it's very different in many ways. Some things are obviously that don't ever change, but just the ability to, like, I'm going to the market, and if I don't make sales, like, my family won't eat and I'll die. And like the stakes were probably a little higher. We have credit cards today, not that they're good or anything, but you get what I'm saying. So just that ability to think, like almost like land on your feet like a cat in difficult situations. I can also tell you, like, one thing that I heard an astrologer say one time that I never forgot was, he was like, if you're ever, in a sticky situation and you feel like someone could misunderstand you, get angry, hurt you, whatever, it's always nice to have someone with Mars and Gemini present because they'll find a way of talking themselves out of it. And I always thought that was hilarious because there were several incidents in high school where, there was about to be a fight that would happen between two people. And I was, for whatever reason, in a number of situations, I would like step in and like easily de-escalate it by saying a few things to both people and like cracking a joke or just being like, using some logic that was really present. Like you'll get suspended and you've already been suspended twice. So like you'll get it way worse and blah, blah, blah. And like, I would just, something like that, and then de-escalate a fight. That happened to me like multiple times. Anyway, so the other thing that Mars in Gemini is good at is sometimes moving around, like Mercury likes to move around, and being able to avoid confrontations or making things worse through like a adaptation. So anyway, those are all kind of Mars and Gemini things that I've learned over time. And as someone who's had it myself, I'd love to hear from any of you who have that placement. And if you have any similar stories or different examples of the placement, that would be interesting. So I think it's going to be quite a journey. We will be revisiting. So everything that I just laid out, if it was like too much information for you, don't worry, because we will break it down several more times between now and the end of this whole thing. Every aspect that I mentioned, we will be revisiting probably in individual videos and sort of walking through it one at a time. All right, that's what I've got for today. I hope that this was interesting for everybody. Please feel free to tell me if you have, Mercury and Pisces. What have the ups and downs of that been for you? Mars and Gemini, Mercury and Neptune, any of these placements, I'd love to hear what the positive and negatives of them have been for you and how you've learned to work and grow through them. All right, have a great day, and we'll be back again tomorrow. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.